Thank you again for coming, attending, logging in. Um, let's see, what do I have to tell you? I mean, we all know the drill by now, probably, but if this is your first rodeo, we're doing it in a webinar format. So the audience, all your audio and visual capabilities are turned off for now. And then at the very end, we promote everybody, all the attendees under the panel, which is what you see right now. So then you can unmute yourself and turn on your video, and we can give the readers a big communal round of applause. If you feel like communicating with each other or the readers at any time during the event, with the chat feature is on, just be wary that there are two options. You can send a message just to the panelists or to everybody, including everybody else in the audience. We're going to start with Evan Kennedy and then take a brief, like 6-7 minute break before we hear from Jennifer Nelson. I hope that you'll consider donating $5. That's usually the price, the cover price for a Segue Reading Series in the before times. Everything goes directly to the readers, and your support is much appreciated, and it really helps us fund the program, continue paying the readers. So I think that's about it. Evan, are you all set? Okay, so why don't we get started? And it's going to be Ven. Let's get started.
Okay, cool. Thank you for coming, everyone. Thank you, Evan and Jennifer. I'm really excited to hear both of you read. When I was thinking about, oh, how am I going to introduce Evan? I read The Sissies and I read Terra Firmament, and then I thought to myself, I can't write about all of this because it'll be too big. So I just decided to pick your new book to talk about a little bit about instead. Evan Kennedy is a poet and bicyclist whose work, or the work I've been with as a reader, is fused with a devotion to a contemplation of entity in every iteration, definition, or resemblance, and to implicating the syntax of phenomena. Am I to trust a joy that is no more or less there now than before, is a book composed of short lyric essays that are part autobiography, part auto theory, part inquiry into how impossible it may be or feel to translate the gap between language and being, or syntax and motion. A network of sometimes abstracted routines, rooms, quotidian activities, thoughts, lust, fluids, dangers, flamboyant blossoming despairs, and elations are woven together, woven apart, and are transformed by the fact of their recorded proximity into motions of inquiry, where glimpses of a life appears, is critiqued, becomes multiple, or nothing. Evan illustrates a beautiful interconnectedness, one that I really, really love, both in the ways experiences are expressed linguistically, the awe, elation, horror they provoke, and in the form of the text, like its architecture, its cyclical or swirling, or often repetitive gesturing and recall. Appearances of a memory, entity, or idea occur more than once or simultaneously, but are never the same. The form's interlinking transmutedness feels essential to the book's spirituality, which might be anchored in part in an address to what Evan and his friends call the darkness. As Evan defines it, the sensitivity to the trouble of our species creates an aspiration to transcend the conditions in the world that permit this trouble. Darkness, of course, is not limited to the world. It is also reflected in ourselves. Observation of darkness in ourselves is the darkness. Having the darkness implies that we are alive, and acknowledging this is to have the darkness. The best outcome is a moment of transcendence, such as an affirmation of goodness or an expression that care, an expression of care that opens a view upon a brilliant totality that includes us. He is the author of Jerusalem Notebook, The Sissies, Terra Firmament, Schuins to Ruin, and Us Them Poems. He runs the occasional press Dirty Swan Projects and was born in Beacon, New York in 1983. Everyone, please welcome Evan Kennedy.
Thank you so much, Ben. That was beautiful. I really appreciate it. Yes, thank you to everyone at Segue, Artist Space, Roof, Jennifer, it's a pleasure to read with you. And thank you to everyone tuning in. I'm going to read from I Am I to Trust the Joy, that joy is no more or less there now than before. At the party, I praised the cake, only to be told that it came from the worst supermarket around. They sent me home with it, so I threw it in my bag and pedaled into the dead of night, a faintly glimmering world. Like I was a passenger, my bicycle brought me past the police station where the entire world's criminals were locked up. I went past the firehouse where the entire world's burning began. It occurred to me that some indestructible thing might be within myself. I could phrase that as a question, but then the reader would inflect the sentence, and I do not want to make singers of my readers just yet. The idea that I carry this indestructible thing and not seek it, I thought, is worth examining. I would prefer to discover the relation between my blood flow and another's body's curves. My pulse quickened to accommodate the incline that I pedaled, much like it would quicken when I found the one with whom to share this cake. Approximating paradise while remaining cautious would put my feet in opposite directions. I thought about antiquity, how people fear to cross their world's boundaries, which to others today or yesterday or last year appear like a stone's throw away, at most a coastline a few degrees past the horizon. I suppose I am stuck on such questions as these, because otherwise I would be living irredeemably. I was taken past the laundromat, spinning the entire world's washing, the hospital nursing the entire world's newborns, the restaurant setting the entire world's tables. The state of my cake was somewhere between mishandled and crushed, working its way irreversibly to the second condition and likely toward more thorough mistreatment before I could offer it to anyone. My sensitivity to the tenses I used and use became and becomes yet another casualty of my distraction. My days last equally long, and each is the same distance from me. I sat for a portrait drawn by my love. When told to pose naturally, I found that my artist intended to uncover a hidden resemblance. Limbs distended, head pinched at the temples, eyes pushed into the skull. The drawing showed a preference for bodies that function less than perfectly. I was not sure what had been seen in me. Once finished, we undressed in the bed that had been unmade by my modeling. I prefer beds to be unmade by love. In this moment, the bed was further unmade by a lick of violence that I was unable to withhold. That we breathe and hear involuntarily, this suggests that we are still persuadable. Shot through me, is the writing of someone I never knew who died in an epidemic. Somehow when I'm reading, as though it were the author's hope, my body is weakened and soon thrilled. That the author lived elsewhere in another decade is no matter to my penetrability, my belief that we both could have made it. The writing's preemptive love with its reader is evident, as are its author and intentions. I should have been born in that other time to get my nose out of this book and into a hollow along that author's body. A bid to deepen our intimacy, risking its corruption and exasperation. Though I've been willfully seduced in premeditation, perhaps to bring my author some comfort while lying in bed during those dark moments that no one should face on their own. It was said that it is possible for someone to become so defiled by the world that they would be unrecognizable to family. I offer myself as example. In a foreign country, I started a romance. I was visiting from a wildly permissive town. My new friend was also from abroad, but from a non-permissive place. I could go as far as saying that in the city where we met, the prospect of our oppression had been suspended. Here, my friend was subject to less violence. I had intuited this through local newspapers. What was not clear, however, was the degree of permissiveness that I had lost. I said to myself that it was not a significant loss since I had enough degrees to spare. My passport allowed my return. My money was the same color as theirs. But we were still required to be watchful. Some types, perhaps, would be nuisances from time to time. Accompanying a body that was often in danger gave me the feeling that I'd been under guard throughout my life. During our sightseeing, the only word I recognized was the one for light, because I am just barely monolingual. Inside churches, little branches from local trees were available for a donation. At night, I became quite acquainted with this one's torso and that hollow forming a juncture between spine and skull. My nose fit well within that hollow. This one, when undressed, was discovering a security that I always enjoyed. The hotel room was a satellite of a haven that I occupied daily. If this is homesickness, I thought, I must marry everyone in danger overseas. I saw in this romance someone whose chronology was much shorter, not only because I was older and from a permissive town, but also because danger had germinated in my friend a quickly burning yet defiant radiance. My romance's self-preservation extended to mine. The pain of my almost excessive freedom was being revealed. My subject must be whatever is now peripheral to my vision. It should never be lost upon my sight's alignment. When you and I were together, you lay in my arms, and I wished to occupy the position for a little longer. When you checked for my pulse, I found a form of life. Up to the day we met, the world's conditions were preparing of me a body that could spend this life together. When you bandaged my bleeding, I understood I was already prepared by my intuition. You put a hand to my chest, occupied my openings, dragged me from the pit, dressed me to meet your mother. The strain of my muscles was a matter of articulating these situations, the weakening of my resistance. When you are away, the world approaches. It falls at my feet, out of its senses, inarticulate, a reality. I see its potential, everything that could be accomplished if I join it again. The world holds my attention. There are moments when I join it and healing begins immediately upon the injury. Other times, however, I wish that you would return, since your arrival would chase out my unwelcome occupant, this native invader. I wonder how it entered, whether I somehow asked it over. My page becomes dirty with speculation, a step I will incorporate into the process if this happens again, and it probably will, since I'm not yet ready to leave home. My body is like a transmission waiting to be sent. To acknowledge an intruder, then return to what I was doing might be the clearest expression of my fondness. I am most content when I appear as your mysterious arrangement of the pile of atoms creating my physical dimensions. When despair about the world grows in me, on me grows an ecology. Any part of my body is precedent. My eyes exemplify the rippling scene in shallow pools, inhabited by the smallest lives, even singular cells, and where roaming animals refresh themselves. All are welcome to rest around my eyes and whatever has taken root. At each of my collarbones is a chasm with shade. Beneath are blood vessels and nerves that assist my structure. Unheard of colors are seen on the flora and fauna found on and inside me, a terrain of musculature and fatty deposits. The rolling of my hips is a place of relaxation. The pits of my arms are two sources for watering. I always spill essential materials when making my love comprehensible. Blooms extend from damper regions, so beehives later appear, little economies in air. My eardrums may rupture from their buzzing, but I have been busy too, marking my methods of self-preservation. This includes replenishing my fluids so that you can find me fecund. The hollow of my groin attracts forms known for their resilience through the seasons. A few are familiar, though often they are not. My legs, covered like others with a light down, have hardened from everyday exercises in curtailing my terror. These legs are negotiated by climbers and traversers intent on lengthy journeys. There, they may learn obedience around the places I am tattooed, a scarring synonymous with testimony. Any living thing can approach me, but I would never let them grovel at my feet because it is often my feet that resist my conscience. You must take me as just one erotic and neurological, sensate and creative totality. One nose, two eyes, two arms, two legs, 10 fingers, 10 toes, though my description here becomes presumptuous. I have not recently verified these figures. When despair about the world grows in me, on me grows an ecology. We spent enough time together to amount to a life. You still appear to me a wonder. I refer to what you said to inform my discipline and disobedience. We faced losses that could not impact the likes of us. I gambled and lost your money, poured and spilled your drink, picked and spoiled your blooms. I owe you all of these back, though I continue to lack the essentials we declined, such as sleep and breathing. If it was violence that loitered outside, we toured our rooms. I buzzed my hair close and threw the clippings from the balcony. Then we put on black clothes. Styled for self-preservation, we walked out into society. Shame in our lives was unhelpful. If there was an outside world, then we still meant to float within our conversation. It was love, and less importantly, a model for living. Each part of your body articulated. I made a habit of observing you when you were eating, drinking, pissing, fucking, walking, standing, sitting, waking, speaking, and keeping silent. I could feel myself being seen doing the same. A watchful moment was a unit of measure, as was the length of our limbs or our tongues. We rested against one another. It was a sign of our resilience. I relied on you in my independent study, and you carried my poems in your pocket. It wasn't amazing that the sum of my labor could fit in a pocket, but that you chose my work to carry with you. It made no difference whether our thinking was universal or only verifiable on the ground that our shod feet occupied. I replicated by asking the same questions we posed to each other and expecting the responses. I sometimes reached that fugitive feeling. When I first laid eyes on you, I knew we would spend a life together, but not mine, at least as it was or continues to be. I can only articulate the possibility of this life, so I do not know why I try to account for my past and present. My promise to you is as yet unarticulated. I allude to the incomplete form of a life, that I committed an error in this writing, or so I would confess if it were not for how I clarified my desire. I'm going to read 3 selections from a novel titled Stalled Death Train, which takes place in January 2016, in the week after David Bowie's death. Our narrator is Nick, and he's a Bowie obsessive, mourning his star while his unusual relationship is falling apart. My boyfriend is a robot. To be specific, he's an android I purchased from One Life Partners in Soho, New York. We're approaching our first anniversary. My boyfriend is also a hunk, a catalog of human knowledge and achievement, a circuitry I query and admire. He grabs my hand and takes me to his immaculate bedroom. In no time at all, at least I couldn't tell, we've lost our clothes and thrown ourselves on his bed. I straddle him and lay my cock on his chest. I tell him he's the handsomest, then he grabs my hand and smiles, saying in a monotone that I'm not so bad looking myself, handsome for a human, and that qualifier stings because I want to feel closer to him. It already appears that he reads my thoughts, like when I silently wonder about the size of Antarctica, and he says, the area is 5.409 million square miles, results last updated 11 hours, 36 minutes ago. Then he pauses and, looking me in the eyes, asks, is that what you meant by size? I roll my eyes. Then I realize he wasn't making a joke. He was looking to me for clarification. I figure we're overdue for a poetic moment, a bit of feeling. So I say, can Antarctica hold the amazement and wonder I feel for you? Then a few seconds pass. He loses the look that he's present in the conversation because he's processing my speech. And my robot answers, I do not have that information at hand. So I ask him to hold me and we kiss while the sun descends behind the apartments across the way. His place has no curtains as he has no seat secrets or shame. Just another thing that turns me on, lightening my heart. And by that feeling only I experience, somehow hardening both of our cocks. Soon I'm taken by a tinge of violence, so I pull the hairs on his chest and suck on his throat, impeding his breathing. My archiving boy's lungs empty with a moan, a perfect middle C. Everything false I've said, he's made true, if not by verbal correction, then by his perfect composure and loyalty. When I feel that I need some time to myself, or if the differences between us are irreconcilable, he wins me over again. My robot will put his hand on my ass, and I begin to think that he is abolishing the boundaries between us. I've held off on asking him to move in with me, thinking that the sex and information is good enough, the exchange of zeros and ones between us. I kiss his chest and move lower. Then I stop and lie by his side. I say, "What's the last sentence of Moby Dick?" We're looking into each other's eyes. My robot returns to that weird blank expression, dead eyes, then says, "Herman Melville, 1851. And I realize that he's just buying time. I want to say something reassuring, like the question isn't important, that he can answer later, but he already senses my disappointment before he can say, "I do not have that information at hand." He confesses a limit to my pleasure. I put my hands to the sides of his head, then tell him the sentence I'd memorized and requested. It was the devious cruising Rachel that in her retracing search after her missing children only found another orphan. I'm hoping that he'll say that he saw it at the very front of my mind. I had been repeating it to myself, but it's as though he hesitated before his reflection in my eyes. My robot slackens. At first, I think he's powering off, but he's waiting for a word that comes to my tongue in an instant. So in this excerpt, Nick is watching David Bowie's last music video, which was filmed a few weeks before he passed, for a song titled Lazarus. The unforgettable image for me is the last scene of Bowie lip syncing. In profile, backlit, he's the character Button Eyes again, his arms raised at his sides, imploring. The flesh is thinning off his skeleton, emptying itself of any future beyond a handful of weeks. The silhouette of his teeth, like an inverse X-ray, drives home his proximity to death. His teeth are bones from where his gums and oral tissues will recede. I'm meditating on the fact that his tongue and mine will wither. Here he's lip syncing the last long E and me, extending the note, his lungs emptying until he collapses onto the bed, and his teeth are glistening with saliva. Decades earlier, Bowie's teeth were crooked, staggered, a mutation of alien genetics, I guess, or just a common British gob. Having met the love of his life, Bowie got them straightened. Then he bleached the tobacco stains while Marlboros exacted a toll from his heart. Later, a sculptor recreated Bowie's original teeth, memorializing the oddity and genius of his youth, a time he was all bone. In this last glimpse of Bowie singing, the pristine chompers throw the bleakness of his diagnosis into stark relief. The voice, as it was recorded, fails, and he collapses out of the camera's frame. But forget about the teeth. I would like to observe in his wide open mouth the distant planetary systems he sung about. Citizens of those galaxies were given through that mouth a voice. It was his and ours, and more than a few earthlings claimed that lineage. We possessed a fraction of that alien DNA, a brilliant race that made us proud and offered consolation and an origin from where we would begin each day. I returned to our question and answer routine. I asked my boyfriend, "What's courtship like in, I don't know, rural Africa?" My robot's eyes flicker while he consults the cloud. He says. For instance, the Garawal is an annual competition and courtship ritual among the Wudabe Fula of Niger. Young men dress in elaborate costumes and makeup to perform choreographed dances and songs, comprising clapping, chanting, and bell ringing to catch the attention of one marriageable woman. The dances last up to a week, for hours each day. Boys demonstrate their stamina by, and here I interrupt, I say, I'm sorry, I know we're monogamous. It's not an issue of trust. I'm just a little worried. But my robot isn't following me. I'm losing him. Maybe we should have had the monogamy talk. I assumed exclusivity was included because I couldn't picture all these machines going around sleeping with boys who were not their owners or even answering their questions. Besides, my questions were better. I had tired of one-night stands, grinder, dating, unreturned texts, the monogamy talk, the opening the relationship talk, the breakup talk, which often takes me by surprise. We absolutely needed couples counseling. Presumably my robot had eyes for no one else. A robot shouldn't have anywhere else to be, but does mine? On nights we were apart, the manual said, he would be busy upgrading, debugging himself, fixing errors, improving and measuring his IQ. I recalled the phrase, a steep upward curve. Also, he would be caring for plants or animals, completing chores, practicing human expressions and acts of kindness before his mirror. You know, the personal advancement that I myself should have been working on. It's true that my infidelity fears sabotaged my thinking, and it was this very insecurity that led me to purchase my boy, just to be done with hangups and fears and enjoy what I hoped would be a stable relationship. But now I faced doubt and I couldn't tell how to proceed. I had to say something. He was staring at me with that blank look, and the moment I thought up the proper response, I saw something that sent horror through my body. He was missing a pinky finger. My boy, still undressed, is lying on his side, propping up his head with the hand in question. To be precise, it's his left. I count only 4 fingers, lean closer. He may have intuited that I wanted to kiss and make up, but I must verify what I saw. My suspicion is confirmed. The pinky has gone missing, severed at the palm. The sight of blood can make me faint. At least I don't have that to worry about. I say, sorry to change the topic, but what happened to your finger? With a gentle voice, no hint of worry, maybe even a touch of pride, my boy replies, Nick, I decided to begin upgrading myself. Okay, thank you all very, very much.
Thanks so much, Evan. We're going to take a quick 6-minute break, and we'll be back with Jennifer Nelson. Welcome back to the Segue Reading Series. We're going to get going with Jennifer Nelson. Just a reminder, if you could donate, make a small donation toward the Segue Foundation. It goes toward the readers. I wrote down the info for Venmo and PayPal in the chat if you didn't catch it during intermission. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Jennifer Nelson's poems take place inside a painting. Perhaps I mean that reading her poetry is like walking through an unfamiliar museum. At any rate, she's a painterly poet. By that, I don't mean she's consistently imagistic or figurative, but that I can see the brush strokes in her verse. I can feel the golden ratio within her compositions. Her academic life is deliciously entwined with her poetry. She has a plethora of degrees from Harvard, the Courtauld, NYU, and a couple from Yale. She teaches at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, where she explains, quote, I am interested in early modern Christendom with a focus on the 16th century in Europe and its outposts. My art history incorporates the history of science and technology, theology, disability studies, and literary studies, among other fields, end quote. Her frame of reference is concentrated in these areas, creating an atmosphere of classicism within which is planted a feminist sense of postmodern disruption. Her study, Disharmony of the Spheres, the Europe of Holbein's Ambassadors, recently published by Penn State University Press, is about how, quote, inconsistency, discrepancy, and contingency, end quote, came to be viewed as fundamental features of worldly existence in the 16th century. The Ambassadors is that double portrait full of symbolic objects that features an anamorphic skull, which must be viewed from a specific angle to become legible. This perspectival trick sticks out because it cannot be reconciled with the dimensions of the rest of the painting. It floats like an impossible blob in the center of the bottom quarter of the image. As Robert Jones Kleins noted, quote, by exploring the epistemic violence done to the European consciousness and the subsequent rupturing of a unified society, Nelson's book allows us to explore the ways in which parts of the same world are in fact incongruous, at odds with one another, yet at the same time deeply entangled, end quote. Nelson accomplishes the same interdisciplinary acts of pluralization in her poetry, sitting with and even reveling in the anomalies of life, the disharmony of the spheres. Although the scholastic foundation of her poetics by no means requires impersonality. In fact, there's a lot at stake in her writing because of the way she puts herself on the line, plumbing questions of identity, grief, and desire with playful daring. Her debut collection, published by Ugly Duckling Press in 2015, is titled Aim at the Centaur, Stealing Your Wife, after Italian painters who loved to illustrate scenes of Grecian creatures absconding with an affrighted or enraptured damsel. That's how Hercules met his end, you know. It's a long story involving poisoned arrows and blood cloaks. Nelson reframes our notions of scales in lines like, remember, universal means colonial. But then she will also show us how something intimate contains multitudes. I want to fuck a symphony into you. Her follow-up collection, Civilization Makes Me Lonely, won the 2016 Sawtooth Poetry Prize, judged by Ann Boyer, and her next book, Harm Eden, is forthcoming from Ugly Duckling. Harm Eden invites us to honor the strange as it introduces exciting and abstract new textures to Nelson's arsenal and further problematizes our systems of knowledge through which we generate meaning and history. Quote, the special power of mimesis is its recasting the process of revelation as already foregone, end quote. Nelson writes through an ongoing, perhaps endless apocalypse, where civilization is painfully propagated through the evil fantasy of nature. Our Eden is lost, yet ever returning, a paradox that means harm in the language of gods. Her newest manuscript, which will be appearing sometime, is titled Be Kind While Destroying Everything, which almost feels like a cutting rebuke of neoliberal values and praxis. Or maybe she's talking about her own iconoclastic puncturing of popular convictions, the poet as benevolent yet destructive God. Quote, we could unmake Christendom together, she promises. The collection's full of allusion and ekphraxis, a nebulous verse world reflecting, refracting, and thus reinscribing the domain of images in all their beauty and terror. Nelson remarks, quote, to wander the garbage streets with intention is to pray, to do the meaning dance, end quote. Caustic and pithy to destabilize signification isn't nihilistic as much as radical when you consider the type of Orientalisms and colonial delusions that she is interrogating in her poems. How do these systems generate their power? Through cultural representation, that is to say, art. She dwells in this messy tension within the canvas, pulling us into the paintings like a kid in a PBS special. But once initiated, we find the landscapes perverse and thorny. Nelson will be our guide, our teacher. Please welcome Jennifer Nelson.
Wow, Lonely, that is definitely the best introduction I've ever had. And wow, that made me like myself more. Thank you. Thanks also to Ven and Izzy and James for pulling the strings behind the scenes. And thanks, Evan, for that reading. I really, it's just almost this phenomenology of how to relate to other beings that I got all these kinds of levels of intimacy. Yeah, really great work. Thank you so much. And thanks everyone for being here, audience members. I can't see you, but thanks for being here. What I'm going to start with are poems from that current manuscript that Lonely just described, which is pretty much completely ekphrastic, meaning that they're poems that are descriptions of visual art. But of course, they've got other stuff in them too. And okay, so looking at the first poem, there are a couple of things you should know, mainly about the title. First of all, first thing you have to know about the title A is, I'm sorry, it is a pun. B, the line referred to in that title is a line not about the myth of Diana and Actaeon, which you might think it was about, but it's a line in Ovid about creation, and how it comes out of bad seeds or seeds badly mixed together in chaos. And that line gets, you'll see, it gets meditated on and rearranged a few times. Ovid 1:9. So there was chaos and discord at the start of creation, fun times. Have Actaeon's dogs ripped him up yet? Here in his bunched up riding pants, spurs still clipped to his feet. No, a few drops of vermilion near the top dog's teeth, else unbroken. Reverse baptism, splash it left. In divine female ejaculation, Diana arcs the water up. This is pleasure, eyes intent and dark, lips apart, strawberries pluckable on the bank. But whenever women bathe together in a painting or poem, we have to fight the outer pleasure, the male delight, humiliation. Front and center, a naked nymph splits her legs on the foremost edge of the panel. Pubic curls separate hairs from the brush, the pleasure men take in doing what they know is harm, the pleasure of going back to beast, gnawed by one's own beasts, so on. It's a fantasy to return to the conditions of creation, to the original causes of things joined wrong, disharmony. The order of being only human is unnatural at best. If we transgress, we think we might escape. It's autumn, though, and the leaves give up. Men keep turning to metamorphosis by violence, as if force alone could break the curse. We could enjoy it, splitting him up as leaves flee from twigs. His opened snout would gargle spray, stag points sprouted from his head, the root of tears charcoaled long, a wrong preorbital gland. There the former beard beshags the throat, where dogs bay out their bites. Outside the painting, scrabbling leaves click in the trees. I would like to end this dream. The world is dying, and I would rather bathe in the paint alone, disorganized. Paint that clumped in the same place becomes discorded seeds, not well mixed together, a dangerous pornography, by which I mean a form that destroys function, refuses return, refuses the future, unburn. Problem with this chat is now I want to check everything it says. Okay, the next one is actually about a painting that's kind of famous. I don't do that very often. If you're fast, the painting to Google on your phone or on another window is Velasquez, the spinners. I don't know if someone who can type faster than me can spell Velasquez for people, but yeah, somewhat well-known painting. And so here we go, trying to be brave here, taking it on. Thanks, Velasquez, for reminding me of this paradox. Is it really true the customers are gods, the spinners, mortals pushing their luck? That makers, poeters try to outdo what gods are in this dark room where we age and age, surrounded by our tools and by our stuffs, soiled and inconsistent heaps. I've been wondering what it means that in the dark, alone, and sick, I call myself mother, not the woman who bore me, who screams if I try to push past her great absence, so like my own absence, which I must push past. No, when I console myself at the end of control, I console the mother, or any of these workers working backward to become their own beginning, pulling thread as if what happened was their plan. I do not think the foreground woman with older woman clothes a mother. I think her clearly Cloto, the spinner, with measuring Lachesis at the right and faceless killer Atropos between, old-fashioned. But remember the market. In the outer room for clients, the owners have provided entertainment, viola da gamba, theater. There are so many female directors and actors in early modern Spain. The performance today is the contest of Arachne and Athena, for which the workshop made the set. Showpiece tapestries, the mortals rival the rich, but the rich aren't sure they want to buy. The right hand lady looks away, not at us, but at the spinners, lowly origins of splendor. That look is either pity or longing, mirroring the wealthy audience of this paint performance. The audience, Velasquez, placed so low inside the workshop, I beneath the workers' eyes, which is why I started out by saying the workers are the mortals and the customers gods. This is the rivalry Velasquez would finally confront, class war before the letter, but not before revolt. Tries to show the workers as the fates, but isn't that courtly guilt, at best a trace of the notary's son who rode a small boy's knack through apprenticeship and decades to that sun-rayed room with the gilded tapestries, play, and orchestration? He is that right-hand girl who knows she is no god, who looks back at the workers, misremembering their power and longing for it. She has the same expression as the painter in Meninas, so it's him. Almost 50 years into painting, he watches from safety the cutting room floor that opens onto reality. Where does the ladder lead? From the pile of wool pinned in the corner, I'd wager in the loft there are more supplies, raw matter. We don't have to see it. It goes on forever. That same point in the canvas matrix where light shines in the parlor is the dark origin of the workhouse. Below, the killer doesn't cut, but cards the thread, prepares it. I said she was faceless, but she smiles. All right, y'all, here's a warning. I'm about to test your endurance. This next ekphrasis is about a manuscript that's 600 pages long. Enjoy. The Boxer Codex. I should say the Boxer Codex, it's one of the earliest European, it's the earliest European encyclopedic work that tries to treat the Pacific Rim, so East Asia. The Boxer Codex. The braided blue hair of the sea weaves wide and indefinitely, on it like pointed beads. Small ships, bancas, carry naked natives and the things they have to sell. 70 years before, Magellan fucked up a conversation, and for another 100 years from there, these people were called thieves, ladrones, before their name improved to Spanish slang for leg of pork. From the image, I suspect it was the smoothness and the brownness of their bodies that gave them that name, right or wrong. I myself have looked like a lechon. At first, the brownness of the chests, I assumed these were understood as women on the woven sea, offering fish and fruits, but now suspect they're mainly men, but look the same as women. Same hair, same no covering, same roundness all around, same face. So too, the Spanish and the Galleon share a face. Across those faces and that braided sea, striations, as if from pregnancy or broken TV interrupt, scrolling across the scene. Single portion yellowed rain on selected persons. If you hold the manuscript, you see the scene's a fold out, the only one, that it has many times been folded, protected, kept vivid, hence lines. The greatest saturation is in the dyes of Spanish clothes, which must have seemed exotic still a little to the artist, given that the artist made the ocean a rhythm of gradient yarns of sea and the sails of coconut matting like a checkerboard or basket. No European would have painted those sails, or if they had, they might have made them look more functional, as a later picture engraved for the Dutch shows Ladrone expert sailors arriving en masse and getting blown up. But mostly the tell is the sea. This is an East Asian sea. Between my Yuan style, Muromachi painted scrolls, pre-Mughal manuscripts, and early Ming blue and white bowls. I write an essay here. For the first time, I notice a bundle of rods like a fasces, dim in the sea, against its weave, and a Chamorro person diving after. This is iron, the only good Chamorro people wanted from the Spanish. The point of the coconuts, the water gourds, the fish, the thing that's most amusing to the profiteers, this different market where a stupid knife would fetch more goods than gold. Any weight of iron worth whole contents of Chamorro boats. How intriguing that they bite the ropes that bear the iron, como si fuese un rábano, as if it were a radish, and with relish tie the reciprocal coconut up. The top of all this, interrupted by the puny cross of burgundy, red cross on white, what you think of as Spanish, which flies at the main and fore topmasts, runs a flora and fauna margin, semi-repeating, though the bees and birds face the crosses symmetrically, almost close enough to peck. These ornamental borders come from many 1590s cultures, though in this particular fake picture book of life on Earth, the expectation is to document what's local while demonstrating how that local color sings, especially the gold, especially extravagant to use it only in the margin for the edges of petals and parts of bees, outlining a red the way that Oriental restaurants continue this decor. I mean, mainly Chinese and Thai American. And this Manila galleon, folded out on the first page, with its relations to the friendly locals, greeting their lightly laden outrigger canoes, is one reason some people use this word, American, to mean huge occupied swathes of land. The ropes that reel in coconuts and fling out cords of iron feel inexorable as rum lines on a portolan, deployed everywhere along the coasts. Catch everything, catch what's offered and web it. So I, of course, enjoy the bite, shown here on the left as if a bite into iron itself, but on the right, that severing chew before reciprocation. During this exchange, the cannons of the galleon stay quiet. The one threatens foreshortened like a button, whoever opens this book. Are you still in this open sea market? Are you biting the iron hook? The borders continue more regularly for study pictures of ladrones. A spear comes out from behind one border, peeks across the left, a gimmick that the girl might jump out of the page. Across the opening, her partner with a top-knot hair and bow and stash looks ready to kill the Dinagat rat in the border corner. This rat is now almost extinct. Not that rats come first in mourning. With a Kagayanis, you get more gold, a hot midriff on her, literal idols crowning him. If I continue in this sequence, I'll repeat this bad anthropology, attributes, sex, and names. In last night's dream, the editor, Jib Var, would not approve my plan. Meaning somewhere in me, an explorer held back at Gibraltar wants to make the pictures, commission more. Why else are there blank pages? If I were emperor, here the borders shift from jungle rats to lobster for Zambales. Butterflies green and maize pinned with gold look in at the corners. What would I do otherwise? If I led the expedition, should I not abolish expeditions? Should I not yell at the pictures themselves? The people of this land never had a king, and neither did their ancestors. Martha's texting me about the plague, the way I texted her about the fire. In After Earth, directed by Jess X. Snow, Isabella Borgeson set several tiny boats, first in the California desert, then in the Pacific in 2017 or earlier. There are still boats buried in this sand, a vision of a holy ocean after the typhoon, and a double meaning, the word barcada, friend group and boat, or friendship, as she swims with hazel green eyes, underwater with a candle. Reminds me to tell you, barangays still exist, each polity a sailboat and community at once. These barangays allied together, sometimes with a Raja or Sultan or not, within this continuous sea, which vanishes in the Boxer Codex after that first scene, but is implied everywhere, a waterway between borders, sea air in the ink. An ocean blue seeps through and rules the empty pages. The gray of the cannons returns late in the skin of a Chinese deity who is our counterpart, the one who records all people and their names and deeds, and as a general punishes the bad. It carries through the monsters. Gridded up as the book starts winding down. Of course, monsters. You would expect these Europeans to stop the show with unknown beasts, chimeric parts, a small tusked horse with fire blitzing from its limbs, a top-knotted tiger with 5 tails, where a stain looks like it breaks wind. The snow cat has the haircut of native women 200 pages back. I could go on. A bunny and elephant square off in size, while a dragon and Kiirin prince, their rainbow scales and hair ablaze. But no, the pictures end with birds. Shown here as meticulously as birders might today demand. At least one MCO I could confirm in life by purchasing. In the light of this day in a beplagued Wisconsin October, I could order a macaw that looks like MCO from the Pet World Warehouse outlet, 14 minutes drive away, though this facsimile creature came from Brazil. The only Asian parakeet I could acquire is the Alexandrine bird, really named after that Alexander, who probably really had such a pet. They could live 30 years in a cage. And forever in mosaic, as the one from Pergamon, now installed in a museum sanctum in Berlin. I remember Jib Var punching over a desk in those yellow museum backroom lights, consulting the maps, the ones he had and those to come, in a study room where nothing had ever lived except in representation, spread out on a table, which is always also an altar. And that parade of knowledge offered dead, perhaps to the gray warlord of heaven, I could have no place. As I woke up, I was wondering whether I could appeal for a second review. I am a scholar through and through. The part of me still waking up is asking, appeal to who? Give me the last word. Poor immortal crane crouched ho. Dondu het, red-crowned crane, leads a hermit along the edge of the air as a lost ridge curves in a scratched up mirror-sized patch of silk. Sometime in the 13th century, washed by Ma Yuan, whose studies of water passed on through the Ma Sha school and into woodcuts from the Ming, so the unknown artist of the Boxer Codex could rework that old insight into water as a gradient twisting through itself more than 300 years later. The crane is wet, it's posed to air its butt. Behind it, the last few pages of the Codex chip, paper fragments out. Beneath its beak, a wormhole flakes. The hole only stops when another scribe interrupts to copy the local bishop letters to the King of Spain and others, describing the need for governance and conquista. Of course, the crane wasn't going to be a portal. Of course, there is no door. This is it. I await the endless chirrup verdict through the accurate tongue of the last bird who has no reader. Woo! I think that's like the longest thing I've ever written. Thanks for making it. I think we only had one participant drop out while I was reading that. Amazing. This one's shorter, I promise. Carpaccio's 10,000 soldiers betrayed by their generals and sent to Asia to die. I've never been able to tell you what kind of distance I have when I bring you into a painting, and how much it matters what you want and what I give, what kind of warm twilight you want to inhabit, and whether you're next to me or with me at all. I want to fold the scene into our gentle resistance. Inside an AC when it's set on auto, a thrumming muffle on and off all summer long, at moments the machine coughing shut, and then you hear the storm and pellets, and you look outside, an important tree has broken in two, its many angles of branch, remembering darkly the pink lightning in a Giorgione sky below. While thousands of people are dying alone, their dying is shared. If you're with me, this is the moment I realized the model for this in any European painting of 10,000 martyrs would be the plague. Where else would you get these relatively whole bodies with feeling? The workshop model book figures from former masters for the suffering of Christ and his follower victims will remind you since 1348 no Venetian had ever expelled the plague from their eyes. That time I told you, don't believe in suffering. I wasn't denying the plague in your eyes. I was trying to be honest about heaven, where to find the knees when composing a body that failed, or the point of ascension on a swirling hill. How paltry that portal has to be, and how magnificent the angels, more gatekeepers than guides, but beautiful. The original workers' compensation is the site of bounty, attiring the agents who keep it away. I meant Don't take what they're offering. I think for my poems, it seems like I hate art history. I swear I don't, but sometimes. Oh my God, there's so much chat. I'm just gonna quickly look at it. Oh, so many nice things. Oh, I love bubbly for sure. Okay. I thought I'd read a poem from Harm Eden, the book that's coming out with Ugly Duckling next year, and I'm just so excited to be working with them again. So yeah, here goes. I hope to be an unsettler. No land has ever claimed me. No person, no people, no place. I'm always standing between burials, and the nearest tree holds all I can know. At the spring, words bubble up and trickle down in banderoles. At first, I had to read them till the grass smelled sweet and the bugs bit home. Getting old means reading them while the hill of my choices grows. At the end of the field, a deer measures the meadow. She is so small today. What words can you possibly wear? What can I bring you? I, so without kin, I have no hands, no apparatus. Thus offer my persona, a soul medium, a wager, assuming there's something past myself, or perhaps away the particular dead with whom I've walked, have shaped me in some unlit land. What land? I cannot even say it lies beneath the creek, because the creek can never be mine. No creek can ever be mine. I take what I should carry. There is a clicking sound when I stay still, like a gas stove failing. I, defined by misfire. I, defined by naked love, love without relation. I have piled miswords on your desire. Now, I'm asking for forgiveness, not the ordinary kind, puckered with regret. I am asking for a kind of internal endurance, like a child who jumps across a chasm and does not want to jump back. Keep me clicking, please, skimming while the bubbles break my feet. In the field, the deer finds grass at just her height, but not because she wants to disappear. Something's breathing to make those holes while the woodpecker strikes a pose. I have to believe the right world follows. I shout each time it comes, like the sun shouts a highway over open water, hoarse and bright and wrong. Thanks so much for listening. Really appreciate it, everyone.